5:35 right now, and little special segment right now. We are going to speak with Mo Egger from ESPN 1530 in Cincinnati. Mo, thanks for coming in and talking to us. We appreciate it.
Anytime. What's going on?
Well, man, we're enjoying this beautiful weather, which I'm saying tongue-in-cheek. It's dreary and downright suicidal here. I mean, it looks like Seattle outside. It's disgusting.
Yeah.
And
same here.
Yeah. Okay. Well, hey, that's good. We want to have you in. We normally have you guys come in on Thursdays to kind of break down the game more towards the end of the week. But of course, with Thanksgiving, we're going to do it now. I know it's a little ways out, and maybe some storylines will develop. But I kind of want to start off with you. The big question I think really everybody wants to know from a Cincinnati perspective is: are they real? Are they already ready to compete? Or are they just a little bit ahead of schedule and they're just a little bit too youthful? What's your perception from down there?
I think they're ready to beat bad teams, and they're not quite yet ready to beat good teams. And I think that's okay. And that can get them to the postseason because, all due respect to the folks in Cleveland, they have 4 games left against teams who have losing records or who either have losing records or without their starting quarterback in Houston's case, or they play the Browns or the Ravens and the Steelers. And I think you've seen over the last couple of weeks they're not quite to that caliber. They're not quite good enough to beat those teams in those kind of games. But they've been good enough against teams that aren't as good. And really with the exception of the game at Denver, they've taken care of business against the dregs of the league. They've done well against the Seattles, and they beat the Browns in the first game of the season. They've beat teams on their schedule. They took care of the Colts, which everybody has. They've beat the teams on their schedule they should have, and they've had a hard time with the exception of the game against the Bills earlier this season. They've had a hard time against the teams that are quote unquote better than them, and I think that's okay. That's a part of the process. I think if this team's able to get to the postseason, even if they're in the last week or two still in the mix, that's gravy. I mean, I think we knew with a rookie quarterback, with a rookie wide receiver, with some changes to the defense, that this season wasn't going to be judged a success based on them getting to the postseason. It was going to be you were really going to have to pay attention to the way they looked, and this team has passed the eyeball test and has done so even in losses. I think the remarkable thing about what happened against Baltimore was they lose. Andy Dalton throws 3 interceptions. They're down by 17 points, and people feel good about the way the game ended because they didn't fold and were resilient enough to be able to find a way to at least make it a competitive game. And Andy Dalton, despite the 3 picks, did so many good things. I think this year has been more about the eyeball test, and they've passed it so far.
Well, what do you make of Andy Dalton's ability to step right in and be so effective so quickly?
Perfect marriage of intelligent quarterback with a coordinator who knows how to use him, and a wide receiver who's going to be great. Andy, we heard the knocks on him coming out of TCU, and people talked about his lack of arm strength and maybe not possessing the most ideal size for an NFL quarterback, but what he is really, really intelligent. He makes good decisions. The Bengals, in the process of looking for a quarterback in the draft, mailed playbooks to everybody that they planned on bringing to Cincinnati, and mailed them to 4 or 5 guys, and then asked the quarterbacks to teach the Bengals coaches the offense to see how quickly they could pick it up without being coached. And Andy Dalton blew them away with the questions he asked leading up to the interview, with his insightfulness into what the Bengals were doing offensively, and his ability to pick up sort of some of the philosophies and even some of the terminologies without ever really talking to a coach. He blew them away. Jay Gruden at that point fell in love with him, and that speaks to his intelligence. I think you really got to give both him and the offensive coaching staff credit if you consider what the offseason was all about with the lockout. No OTAs, no mini camps. You could draft guys, but you couldn't bring them to town. They had him ready to start week 1, and he's only gotten better from week 1 to week 11. He's gotten better and better week in and week out. They've opened up the playbook a little bit more. They've let him throw downfield. They've taken some really calculated risks. And I think that speaks to Jay Gruden's ability to teach, and I think it speaks to his ability to design an offense around a quarterback's skill sets. And then I think the other thing, and it helps when you got a guy in A.J. Green who, number one, is super competitive, and number 2, can just flat out go get it. I mean, that was, the play he makes against the Steelers in the end zone is the same play they tried on Sunday against Baltimore without A.J. Green, and it was thrown for a pick because they have nobody who could just go up and get the football the way that A.J. can. And so it's really been an ideal set of circumstances. They were desperate for a guy to come in and start right away, so they had to get him ready. They had a guy who could learn really quickly, an offensive coordinator who knows how to use him, and an elite level wide receiver who can make him look better when he underthrows balls. And AJ Green has done that this year too.
Mo Egger, ESPN 1530 with us today, breaking down the Bengals and the Browns. You talk about that wide receiver. What's his health status right now?
Marvin yesterday said, quote, "We'll see." I would say questionable. We'll obviously know a little bit more tomorrow. I'm not going to be stunned if he doesn't play. I'd be surprised if he doesn't play. I think had the game on Sunday been, if this team was further along in its development, and if A.J. Green's a fourth-year guy and the Bengals have to win against Baltimore, he's in there, and maybe he doesn't play, 50 snaps, but he plays. If you were asking me to guess, I'd say he's going to go, but I'm not going to be stunned if he doesn't. And frankly, I think all bets are off if he doesn't play. I just don't trust Jerome Simpson, who did play a great game against Baltimore, but who disappears for huge stretches of games. I don't trust Andre Caldwell. They need AJ to go, and they need AJ to go on Sunday. If they don't, this offense changes, especially because they're not running the ball all that well.
That Carson Palmer situation seems like a fantasy. It seems like a dream, like it never happened now. And part of the reason why I think that is because it seems like everybody may have turned out did well with it. I mean, Cincinnati obviously has Dalton and a pocket full of picks, and I think Palmer is going to be he's going to be okay once he gets settled in Oakland. How is Palmer viewed now? What's his legacy in Cincinnati?
Mixed. I think you have those who took it personally, who viewed Carson and still do as a quitter, and they're never going to be able to get over that. I guess the way I have looked at it is, and I've actually been a pretty vocal critic of Carson's for years, because I think for years Carson kind of got a free pass. We could point to, Chad Ochocinco breaking up the locker room, and we could point to defensive problems and the offensive line kind of eroding in the middle part of the decade. I looked at the Carson Palmer from 08, really 07 to 2010, and I saw a guy who was, for lack of a better term, a bust. And not that he was awful, but he wasn't as good as the Bengals were paying him to be. And if you think back to 05, 04, the conversation was, well, it's a matter of time before Carson's a Tom Brady type guy, a Peyton Manning type guy, and he never came close to that. And so I've been a sharp critic of Carson as a player and the people who have always rushed to Carson's defense when he's played poorly. But at the same time, I equate Carson Palmer to the 20-year season ticket holder who examines his relationship with the Bengals and says, essentially, screw this. I'm done with my relationship with the Bengals and with Mike Brown. I equate it to that, and I don't have any problem with somebody who, and notwithstanding what's happened this year because they've been great, but over the last 20 years, who has examined the way the Bengals have done business and looks at themselves and says, I don't want to have anything to do with this anymore. And that's basically what Carson Palmer did. I really had very little problem with the way he handled the entire thing. And so the fan base is split. You have those who think that he quit, and you have those who understand the way this organization works, knows that it really wasn't going to change, and has no issue with a guy who'd be willing to move on. I would like to think that both camps can look back and, despite Carson not being great over the last couple of years, will appreciate the fact that in 2005 the guy had an incredible season. In 2006 the guy had an incredible season. And I think we're always going to kind of wonder, what if, from a physical standpoint, what if he doesn't suffer the knee injury against the Steelers? What if he doesn't get the elbow problem in 2008? How do things differ? But Carson Palmer's legacy in Cincinnati is decidedly split down the middle and probably will be forever.